So someone makes a truth claim. How do we evaluate it? Let's look at how to evaluate claims. So people can make claims about basically everything. I ate toast this morning. The moon is made of cheese. I woke up at 6 a.m. this morning. I dreamt I was a fish last night. Dolphins are mammals. How do we evaluate these claims? Let's go through a few steps. So the first question is it subjective or objective? So we can't evaluate subjective claims directly. We have to tie them to an objective standard. For example, someone says, murder is wrong. We don't really know from this if it's objective or subjective. We need more information. If they say, murder is wrong, in my opinion, now it's clear. It's in his opinion, so it's a subjective claim. Maybe we could ask for more information of why you think this, and maybe analyze that in terms of philosophy, but this claim alone we can't verify at all, as it's completely subjective and there's no objectivity at all. If someone says, murder is objectively wrong, now this is an objective claim, and we can verify if this is true, false, or we don't know. So all truth claims should start at agnostic, or I don't know, or uncertainty. We're going to make a scale from 0 to 100%, and 50% will be agnostic or we're not sure. So we always start in the middle and then we lower the starting point based on criteria. We first have to ask a few questions. So number one, is it logically contradictory? For example, I exist and don't exist at the same time. So this is not possible according to logic, but unfortunately this is based on an axiom and based on the presumption that logic is valid. So it can't be 0% certain, like we're not 100% certain that it's impossible. We're almost 0.0001%, which basically means it's almost certainly not true. The next question is, does something go against all scientific knowledge and explanations? For example, someone could say, I rose from the dead last week. This goes against all scientific explanations and all evidence, therefore the claim would start, the starting point would be 10%, meaning it will require a lot of evidence to prove it correct. Another example, humans are mammals, so this is the accepted explanation, so it would be around 90%, and it would take a lot of evidence to disprove this claim. The next question you need to ask is the claim verifiable or not? So there are some claims that we can't do anything about. Maybe we don't have access to the evidence, maybe it's not possible to actually find out the truth. For those situations, it basically stays at 50% and we don't know. For example, I had a dream about a donkey last night. This is an objective claim about a subjective experience, but as we don't have the technology to look inside brains and see if that someone actually had a dream, or maybe have a perfect lie detector, we can't verify this claim. Another claim, I had toast for breakfast this morning. So this is in the past. However, it's still verifiable because you could use things like witness testimony, evidence. Maybe you could take a medical test to see if there's any toast inside his system, something like this. So it is verifiable even though it's in the past. Next claim, I am 10 feet tall. This is obviously verifiable because we can just measure someone's height. So if a claim is not verifiable, it stays at we don't know, uncertain. So now we have a framework to start testing claims. Let's go through a list of claims and just go through the process. So first let's start with, my friend rose from the dead last week. What I'm going to define this as is simply being dead for more than a day. So they died, were dead for more than a day, and then came back to life. So this goes against all biological scientific evidence and explanation and theories, because there's been no examples of someone ever doing this and it being proven. So this would start at 10%. So we start the claim at 10%. So what kind of evidence would prove this? It's got a very, very high burden of proof when it's at 10%. Let's look at some bad examples of some evidence. So the evidence here is, my friend is really honest. He never lies to me. He wouldn't lie about this. Are you calling him a liar? So this is not actually evidence, and we call this an argument from character fallacy, which is not sound reasoning because it's not a reliable path to the truth. For example, imagine two people who are both honest, both make contradictory claims. So one person said he did come back to life, and he's honest. Another honest person said he didn't come back to life, and they're both honest. So which one do you believe? You have to believe the honest person, right? This is why it's not reliable, because it can be contradictory. So this evidence, if you can call it that, wouldn't move the score at all, and it would stay at 10%. Maybe the evidence is this. There were lots of eyewitnesses who claimed to see him die and come back to life. So eyewitnesses are notoriously unreliable. They could be wrong, they could misremember something, maybe they were tricked, maybe it was a magic trick, maybe it was a different person, we don't know, but it's unreliable. So again, this wouldn't move the score at all. But what kind of evidence would actually move the score? So it could be something like a death certificate and a validation of them dying with DNA, and then a verification that it's the same person with the same DNA. But again, someone could actually fake a death certificate. It's not exactly an objective standard having a death certificate. That just means someone signs a piece of paper. Doesn't actually mean it's true. I mean, they could be paid. Who knows? So to properly prove this, you'd probably need a medical test before someone died, a medical test after they died to prove they're dead, and then a medical test after they revived, and then that would prove it. Without this much evidence, it's very hard to believe this claim. And this is a demonstration of extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, which was said by Carl Sagan. Okay, next claim. The sun goes round the earth. So this does go against the known explanation. But for argument's sake, let's look at the actual original evidence that people used and argumentation that people used in the past to believe this. So here's a syllogism. Number 1. The earth appears not to move. All other planets and the sun move. Therefore, the earth is likely the center of the solar system and everything orbits the earth. So this is actually very compelling evidence and was in the past. And it's also sound inductive reasoning. However, just because something appears to be true doesn't mean it is. The way we verify this in science is we create a hypothesis and then test that against reality. So what we do is we create a model, make mathematical equations and predictions, and try to predict where the planets will be depending on our model. And if it doesn't predict reality, then our model is incorrect. So with the geocentric model, there were lots of problems. One example of these was the movement of Mars. So when you look at the orbit of Mars throughout the sky, it looks like it goes forwards and then goes backwards, and then goes forwards and then goes backwards. And it doesn't really make too much sense, and the mathematical equations to explain this were really, really complicated. It was also very hard to predict. However, when scientists put the sun at the center of the solar system and then tested that model, everything became a lot easier to predict and the maths became a lot simpler. As this model accurately predicts everything around us, such as solar eclipses, the position of the moon, the position of Mars, it was verified as a scientific theory and the truth. However, if someone comes up with a better explanation that better explains the solar system we live in, then that would overtake this theory. The next claim, Julius Caesar was Consul of Rome. So this is a historical claim. Can we really verify it? Well, we can, but not with the same certainty of claims you can test today. Firstly, we go through the framework, so it's not contradictory, it doesn't go against science, and it can be verified using historical evidence. So the starting point is 50%. So to verify this claim, we need to look at historical sources and see what they say about this claim. When we do this, we find Cicero's letters that refer to Caesar being consul. Suetonius, Plutarch, and Appian also wrote about Caesar being consul of Rome. There are no historical sources that go against this claim. Therefore, we have about 70% certainty that this actually happened, because it's very unlikely for so many sources to lie or be wrong about this claim. So the next claim, the universe and the earth are 6,000 years old. This is a claim by a minority of Christians. Of course, this goes against scientific explanation, so this starting point will be about 10%. It's not contradictory and we can verify it, but it goes against science, so 10%. So what science does this go against? First, we have the observable universe. For example, the Milky Way is about 100,000 light years across. So for the light to get to our eyes, it takes at least 100,000 years. Therefore, the galaxy alone has to be more than 6,000 years old. Then we have radiometric dating, which is where we look at the atoms inside rocks to see how much they've decayed. When we do this, we find about 4.03 billion years, which is close to the estimate of how old the Earth is. So the evidence Christians normally use for this is they count all the lives in the Bible, and they find the total is about 6,000 years. But the problem is, why is the Bible a trustable source? For this claim to be true, you need stronger evidence than simply a holy book, and you'd also need to explain why all the evidence goes against your claim. So the next claim, aliens built the pyramids. For some reason this is all over the History Channel lately, I'm not sure why. So firstly, it's not contradictory. It doesn't go against scientific explanation, technically. So it's not entirely verifiable. You can't 100% prove this is wrong, because we don't have enough evidence, because the pyramids were built too long ago. However, we can use inductive reasoning and compare competing explanations. So the starting point is 50%. Let's look at the evidence. So someone's evidence might be, there was no written record of the pyramids being built. They are too mathematically precise for people of that time. It must have been aliens. There is no better explanation. So this is what we call an argument from ignorance, which is simply where you either can't find a better explanation, therefore your explanation is true, which is not solid reasoning. It's not a reliable way to the truth. So there's no direct evidence that aliens have ever come to Earth, and there's no direct evidence that they built the pyramids. There's no tools, no ancient knowledge, no sources claiming this. The only evidence is that the pyramids seem to be advanced, and that's all. This is an extraordinary claim because we haven't had any proof of aliens ever coming to the Earth, so it needs a lot of evidence to verify it. But there is a more plausible explanation. For example, maybe humans built it, and their knowledge of engineering and construction was more advanced than we think. This is a more plausible explanation because it requires fewer assumptions. And this is called Occam's razor, which is simply where you have competing claims and you're not sure, and you presume the explanation with the fewer assumptions is correct until evidence proves otherwise. But you can't prove anything for certain with Occam's razor, it's simply about probability. So the final score here would be about 40%. As there's a more likely competing explanation, we would prefer that over this one. Okay, the last claim. Murder is objectively wrong because we all feel it is bad when we do it. This is an ethical claim, and we can still verify these in philosophy. It's not contradictory, it's not against science, therefore it starts at 50%. So objective morality hasn't ever been proven in philosophy. But that doesn't mean it's not correct, it just means it hasn't been proven. So this is not actually evidence, this is actually an argument from nature, which is again a logical fallacy. Just because something's natural does not mean it's automatically good, or valid, or true. For example, crocodiles naturally feel a different morality to us. Adult crocodiles will eat baby crocodiles, and they don't feel bad about it. Does that mean it's good? We feel bad naturally, and they feel neutral naturally, which is correct. It's a contradiction. There are also people who don't feel bad when they kill, psychopaths, therefore the claim is actually incorrect. But as we don't have a competing or accepted hypothesis, this claim will stay at 50%. So that's all for the claims. I hope I've given you a solid framework for analysing claims. Here's a summary. All truth claims should start at 50%, meaning neutral, and then lower or raise the starting point based on scientific explanations or contradictions. Not that scientific explanations are immune to error, but this simply means that there is overwhelming evidence and a model that reliably predicts reality. If a claim isn't verifiable, then we can't verify its truth. If there are competing explanations, then we usually presume with minimal certainty that it was the simplest explanation until proven otherwise with further evidence. We use evidence combined with logical and scientific explanations to try and predict reality. If the prediction turns out to be correct, then the explanation is accepted until a better one is discovered. But that's all for this video. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll see you guys next time.